Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Richard Loftus. Richard, it's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for asking. Thanks for having me. Like over 60 episodes. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited for this episode. There's a lot that we can sort of get into, which should be really exciting. But first and foremost, Richard, in your own words, what makes you a man?
I have been thinking about this question a lot because we've been speaking about doing this episode for maybe about a month now, and I'm obviously a listener. So I've kind of been wanting to say something like really profound, real deep. I've been doing my research and yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to deliver any of those things for you, unfortunately. But what I can say is where I fell on this question was around, have you heard of the man box theory before?
I've not. No, let's go with this.
Okay, let's go with this then. So essentially, if you were to get a bunch of young lads at school to write down all the words or phrases that go in the box associated with being a man, on the outside of that box would be all of the words that aren't. And invariably, you know where that's all going to fall, right? So that there's going to be like hyper feminine words that are going to sit on the outside of that and real masculine ones that sit inside it. So when I was at school, that man box theory kind of definitely led me to feel othered. You kind of, it sets the traditional norms of masculinity, which constrict how boys and men are allowed to act. And for me, what that meant going to an all boys secondary school, it meant that other people kind of understood me and my sexuality before I was really even aware of it. And so all of the characteristics that I was displaying didn't fit within that man box, right? They were kind of on the outside of it. I didn't act tough. I didn't use violence or anger. But yet, what's really interesting about this man box, and the reason I kind of ended up falling here, is that in later life, those norms, those societal expectations of what being a man is what made me feel like I was unable to seek help for the mental health crisis that I ended up going through. So even though at school I was feeling outside of that man box, it was actually being within it, trying to break out, that kind of led me to my mental health crisis. So, I was unable to speak up. I was unable to ask for help. And yeah, I think what I've learned through that, other than a whole bunch of cliches that do kind of carry a lot of weight, is that there's strength in vulnerability. And I suppose that is my answer to your question.
Cool. So it was you didn't feel like a man, and then when it came to shit hitting the fan per se, you felt like a man, and that's why you couldn't get any.
Yeah. Do you know, I don't think it was that I didn't feel like a man. It was that other people were kind of saying you're not displaying the characteristics of what one should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that was definitely my experience at school. But actually, as an adult, it was kind of those kind of societal things around it that, yeah, kind of made me feel like shouldn't show weakness, shouldn't cry, shouldn't be showing emotion, shouldn't be vulnerable, all of those things.
Awesome. So, Richard, you reached out to me, and this episode is going out pretty much close to when hopefully I will have done what we said we were setting out to do. So
Yes.
why don't you let people know what it is that you do in the space now, and then we can get a little bit more into your story from there.
Sure. So, as I've kind of already touched on, a few years ago, I had a bit of not a bit of, had a mental health crisis. And, but one of the amazing things that have come out of that is I founded Well Run Brum, which is a men's mental wellness movement. So it's got the traditional element of your usual run club. We run a 5K around Birmingham every fortnight. But the unique element to Well Run Brum is that each run begins with a guest speaker. So if you're a man that wants to come and join us, and you maybe are wanting to explore your mental wellness, you are going to hear from a guest speaker who maybe inspires you on a particular topic, who offers you some advice or some thoughts on their own experiences of their mental health journey and how fitness has supported them through that. They might give you ideas on resilience or tips and techniques. But you are going to come to a run club where that guest speaker is going to be the first person to speak and therefore open up that conversation, and most importantly, enable you to enter into a conversation if you choose to. Or you can come and listen, or you can come and just run. But yeah, we launched in March. We have run over 100 km at this stage. As I say, it's every fortnight. And it's a run around Birmingham that is at a conversational pace. So once you've heard from that guest speaker, we get out on the run and you can be chatting to people. Sometimes, if you're new to the group, it'll be people you don't know. We've got regulars, of course, as well. So sometimes you're chatting to people that have done this quite a lot, but we have such a wide range of speakers come and join us. And it's been really incredible, and born out of my own experience, really, of not necessarily seeing the representation that I was looking for in men speaking openly, vulnerably about their mental health or their life challenges, and wanting to create a space where that was okay and enabled and supported. Whilst also recognizing that running has been amazing for my mental health and has absolutely been something that I go to as a way to kind of clear my mind, to think through my thoughts, and when I go out running socially as well, to chat to people about what's going on in my head.
What was the idea behind the guest speakers? Because we see a lot of things around like walking groups or running groups where the idea is you turn up and the conversation flows naturally. What was the idea behind bringing someone in to spark that conversation?
Yeah, I think certainly when I was going through my challenges, it can be really intimidating to be the person that is going to speak up. It can be really intimidating to say to somebody that I'm having a tough time. And, you can ask someone, are you okay once? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm good. You can ask them again and they'll be like, yeah. And then it's probably only after the third time when you start really pushing that you might get an honest answer, right? And so knowing that and having experienced that, I wanted to find a way that I could make it a bit easier for a guy to be like, cool, I need to say where I'm at this moment. And so that guest speaker is a guy that enables that. It enables that conversation to open up, and they bring something to the table that you might not have heard before, or that you might have been thinking but not known how to articulate, or they are speaking exactly to you. Every word that you hear, you're like, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me. So it really is that person that kind of leads the way for you, really. They start the conversation in a real meaningful way.
I've found the more I talk about my mental health, my issues, my story, the more people that are willing to open up to me, for sure. I think it's a powerful thing to do, to speak. I think it gives people license that may not have had license to do it, or live in the man box, as you say. So it's for me, it's great. I think it's really important that people do share their stories. This is why I've done the podcast. That's why there's 63 of these things, because, like you say, not everyone's going to resonate with everyone. Not everyone's going to believe everyone. Not everyone's going to take something of use from everyone. So the more people that can talk about this, the better, for sure. So yeah, I think it's a good way. It's a nice way of doing it. But it also, I guess this is my sort of follow-up question on that is, do you think that reduces people coming, or do you think it reduces the friction enough? Because we have another thing where it's like men talking about mental health, and it's like, right, I'm not going to that because I know I'm talking about mental health. What's the balance there like?
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge and something I think about a lot. So we have had over 40 men take part since launching in March, and we have a real high return rate, which is great. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there is an element of it that requires you to take that initial step to be like, cool, I'm going to enter into that space. And yeah, I think that can be a little bit of a barrier. And I think that's where social media has been super important for the growth of Well Run Brum, is that you might see your mate turning up for a run, for example, and they're tagged in the group photo afterwards and they've shared that to their story, or they've done like a selfie video of them running whilst they're out. And I think that's kind of key, really. It's kind of word of mouth, but on social media, and it's someone in your friendship group or just outside of your friendship group that is going, that is kind of being a little bit public about saying, yeah, I've gone to this space because it's something that I'm interested in. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I'm not going to lie. There is an element of it that requires you to go, cool, I want to learn, or I want to be in a space where it's okay to have that conversation. And I think, reaching out to you, for example, your podcast is a great way of doing that. And hopefully more people are intrigued by entering that conversation and willing to go there,
Yeah. I think there's men need pushing, right? I think we're creatures of habit and we're very comfortable in our position. I think we do need a push, whether that's from a partner or a family member or just something bad happening in our lives that makes us go, got to do something about this. So those pushes definitely help. But I also think there needs to be steps. So I've obviously done podcasts with a lot of people from different backgrounds. I guess top of my head, Luke from 2 Pints Deep is almost that initial step where he's just stepping into the pub and he's saying, you don't have to do anything. There's just beer mats here and we might have a conversation. Doesn't really matter. And that's literally step 0, right? And I think as people move down the steps, they need little pushes and little things from that. So that friend selfie, it's sort of, do you know what I think it is, which I'd love to get your opinion on, is there's an element of jealousy. It's like, oh, you go to that, do you? What's that like? And they'll want to get all their info without making the commitment.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And there's that little bit of FOMO with it as well, right? Like, oh, so you can do a 5K. Like, yeah, maybe I'm interested in that.
Yeah, nice. Why don't we go a little bit back and let's have
Sure.
an understanding of how you got here? Because right now everything seems like it's starting to move in a nice direction, but there was obviously a bit before that is an important step, that step -1 almost. So yeah, let's go back to that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, where to, it's such a massive topic. I suppose, yeah, let's move back a little bit. So I guess my mental health crisis reached a point where over a sustained period of time, I think I'd gradually been losing my sense of self over a sustained period of time, to a point where I lost who that person was. And ultimately, as I ended up saying to a receptionist at the end of the phone, to the local GP, I'd got to a point where I couldn't cope with life anymore. And it's difficult, I suppose. The reason I'm sort of struggling and like gazing off into the distance about it is it's difficult to talk about, in as much as there's not like a singular moment I can like say it was that thing, because it wasn't a singular moment. It was a series of what probably to other people sounded like small inconsequential things. And it goes back to what we were talking about having somebody else be that kind of like role model for speaking up, because in the brief moments that I may have said something about where I was at, because in isolation those moments seem so small and inconsequential, it was probably difficult for somebody outside of my mind to recognize it as a much bigger deal than it was becoming to me. And that kind of, as a consequence, I guess, just made me completely shut down and stop engaging and start being really silent and trying to manage things on my own, and ultimately failing at managing things on my own. And so, yeah, it got to a day where I kind of was driving into work and just sobbed the entire way going into the office. Like, so it was an hour's journey, and it was kind of a choice in that moment, I guess, which is like veer off the road or make an effort to try and find a different different route, like literally find a different route. And so I got into the office, called the GP, and I think the receptionist at the end of the phone, in addition to like trying to identify what I was saying through my tears, was also able to hear just how panicked I was. And panic's a really good description for it, because I was panicked. I was, as you know, completely unable to recognize the person that I'd kind of become over that time. And I was able to get seen that same day, which is not everybody's experience. And I recognized how fortunate I was that my local GPs were able to get me in that quickly. And I was prescribed antidepressants. I was signed off work for 3 months in the end. And it was during those 3 months that kind of running became a real good feature of kind of like my recovery, I guess, and kind of finding my way back to who I was.
It's such a weird one, because that's what you want as a man. I'm speaking generically here, but I find most men to be quite logical, and I guess the build-up of emotion and the build-up of trials and tribulation there's no it happened then. Whereas like if you break a leg, I fell over, I broke my leg.
Yeah.
Whereas you wake up one day and you're like, I don't know who this man is. I don't know what I'm doing. Where am I? Like, what is life? And you just, when did this happen? And it can be just a build up and build up and build up. So it's tough to say what it is. And like I wrote, when I first started talking about all this, I wrote an article, and the first line was, "It's irrelevant how I got here. I got here," which at the time was sort of to say it doesn't matter what's happened or how you've got here. And I think that was the important thing, and that felt like the important thing for me at that time. Whereas now I feel more comfortable and more confident, I guess, and like it's almost like I know I can't get back there, so I'm happy to talk about it. Whereas maybe when you're going through it a little bit more, you might think that you're speaking it into existence a little bit as well, which is true, right? I mean, there's elements to that for sure. So it's a fine balance, but yeah, I think exercise and running are super great. What was your experience with antidepressants and also the exercise? Because some people go on to antidepressants for a very long time. Some people are like, I just don't want to do it. What was your sort of experience with them?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with stuff that is related to your mind, because like you say, when you've broken a leg, you won't have friends or family be like, I don't think you need a plaster. I don't think you need a cast for that leg. Like, I think it will just sort itself out. Like, maybe just give it a bit of time. If honestly, if any of your friends or family are saying that to you, like, they are mad. They're the ones that are mad, right? But when it comes to your mind, because it's not something that someone can physically see, and because if we've just spoken about, it's kind of for me, certainly it was like a gradual thing that happened over time. When it came to a conversation around like, look, this is where I'm at. I've been signed off, been prescribed some antidepressants. People are like, do you need that though? Maybe you don't need that. And these are people that aren't qualified. These are people that haven't been to school to study medical practice. These are just people that have got an opinion. And that kind of, in that immediate aftermath, that brought its own challenges, because immediately I'm putting up a wall with a group of people that I'm like, you're already not meeting me where I'm at. And I do not have the capacity for a conversation around your opinion beyond what a GP is telling me I need in this moment right now. So my immediate reaction was like, yep, I'm going on the antidepressants, and running at that point was not on my agenda. And I think it's probably about like 3 weeks, maybe a bit more, I'd been on the antidepressants. I think I'd kind of got to a point where my mind had started to get just a little bit quieter, and that I was able to kind of just like I was out of the haze, I guess, as they started to kick in after a couple of weeks. And it was probably around that, as that started to happen, was when I started to consciously be like, I need to get up off the sofa and do something that, you know, that isn't just sitting watching telly. Like, I need to physically move my body, like my body needs to do something. And that's when running kind of came into it. And as far as the antidepressants were concerned, I don't take them anymore. I had a conversation with the GP as a kind of about 3 months in, I guess, where I was like, you know, I want to have a conversation about about coming off these in a way that is structured so that I don't get back to where I was, but that kind of means that I can not be reliant on them on a permanent basis.
Yeah.
And that seems to be working all right for me at the moment.
I did a podcast a few weeks ago now with a guy, Tom Conway Gordon, and he talked about it being a leveler for him and like a setting him a baseline. And you talk about reducing noise, which I think when you're going through the weeds, so to speak, can be really useful. For me, it's something that there's a fine balance between dependency and using them to sort of help you get out of where you want. I think it's such a tricky one. I've had GPs on as well, and they've sort of said it's literally like that's just what you do. You just put the plaster on it, which is the sad truth. And there are other ways, and it's the way that ticks the box and solves the most problems. But I think for me, if it can create a level for you that you can build from, amazing. But what I don't see is it as the sole solution. So what's your thoughts on that? Is that where you're sort of at with it?
Yeah, I for me, it wasn't. I can understand though and appreciate that for, you know, my experience is my experience alone. Do you know what I mean? And I think for some people that need that longer term support, if that's working for them, you know, like I said about everyone else with an opinion on it, like who am I to be the guy that's like, no, I don't think that's right for you. If that's working for you, you do you. Like, for me, it got me to a great point, and going forward, it's not something that I'm using at the moment, but I definitely wouldn't be opposed to it if I was needing it in the future. I'd have that conversation again for sure.
Yeah, I just have like this. I agree, right? There's like if it works for you, it works for you. But for me, there's this element of using to push yourself forward and go from there, and then just going into, I guess, dependency in a sense of like, there's no real urge to get out of it. It's just that you know that you're bad at the moment, so you're just going to take the antidepressants because you know that that's going to keep you at a level. And that for me is almost like, why would you want to live like that, I guess, is sort of a question. And we can get into this as well, which sort of gets into the idea behind mental health and having sort of like a mental well-being issue, in the sense of like, there are people with severe mental health issues where medication is 100% necessary and exactly what they need to sort of function. Done a podcast with great young lad, Paddy, who is OCD, and he's obviously on medication, and he takes pictures of that to reduce the stigma around that, which I think is great. But he has an actual he has an actual mental like full.
I think that's where this conversation gets so nuanced that it's difficult to distill into like into kind of like a broad stroke viewpoint on it, because it's not a binary thing. Like you said, when we talk about these sweeping things like mental health or mental well-being or mental fitness, whichever kind of, you know, whichever any of those work best for you, right? There's such a spectrum within that to take kind of the viewpoint of this is going to improve your mental health. Well, what do you really mean by that? Like, what are we talking about? Because are we talking about, as you've said, someone with OCD? Are we talking about somebody that's, you know, tried to take their own life in a moment of crisis. Like, where on that spectrum are we talking? But unfortunately, that catch-all, which is what we as humans love, right? We love the catch-all and we love the simplification of the conversation. That it makes it really difficult, because there are elements within that spectrum where medication is the only answer, and there are elements on that spectrum where it may not be necessary. In fact, it isn't necessary. But then what about all of that grey area in the middle?
Well, that's life, isn't it?
Right? That is the beauty of life. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess it's a really similar analogy to how I began with that man box theory, right? There's the bit on the inside and the bit on the outside, but there's all that grey matter. There's all that grey matter that sits around it. There's a real synergy between those things, I think.
Yeah, there's no right answer. I'm speaking from my experience. I didn't go onto antidepressants. I didn't seek therapy. This year, I'm looking at doing therapy because I feel that I'm in a position to do that.
That's amazing.
Is it?
Yeah, that's amazing that you're like, I feel like I'm in a space where I want to give that a go. I'm not saying it's amazing that anything other than like, oh, I'm going to try that.
Yeah, but I think that's more what I'm trying to create, which is a understanding, and that there isn't a one size fits all. I think there's a lot of people that go through situations like yourself where they go to a doctor and they go, here's some antidepressants, and they go, thank you so much, Mr. Doctor. And that's it. They don't explore anything else. They don't try anything else. They don't go for a run. They just go back into the same life that they were in before. With essentially a bandage over it. And then they continue to live at a baseline. And then guess what? They just up the dosage. Like, that's the sad truth. And that for me is a little bit scary for certain populace. But again, we're coming up with, we're solving the NHS mental health crisis.
I mean, that is where we really need to focus attention, right? Though, is, that's exactly where we need to focus attention, is solving the NHS mental health crisis, because that is the context in which this conversation is happening. There, and particularly for men, like what a sad state of affairs that we live in a time where, like, 1 in 4 men under the age of, I think it's 45, the highest cause of death is suicide. Like, that's it, in this day and age, in this time, that is preventable. That is completely preventable. So yeah, that's 100% where we should be focusing our energies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 55 in the UK, 55 in the UK, 50 in America, something like that. 1 in 5 men don't reach 65. The suicide pandemic is a part of that. I think some other things that we don't talk about as well, add up to that as well. But yeah, the fact that there's like 2 crazy statistics for me, which is 1 in 5 men don't reach 65, which I just find
mind-blowing.
And that your likely cause of death until you're 55 is that you'll do it yourself, which is just insanity on so many levels. But let's talk about men a bit more specifically, because obviously that's your group and that's what you've got there. So what are some of the struggles? What are some of the things that are happening, or what are some of the things that you're seeing that they're doing that are a bit different as well?
Fascinating. I think the fitness side of it, like, we're a running, men's mental wellness running group, right? So I think men typically, again, going back to the idea of like the socialization of men, sports is always an area where men are invited to be comfortable and enter into that space. So I think having a running group already as an entry point is enables people to feel like, yeah, that's sports, I can take that on, which honestly, when I was growing up wasn't my experience. Like PE, nightmare for me. I did not want to be doing PE at all. I certainly didn't want to be like going into the gym showers afterwards. That, I mean, even the thought of that now makes me go like, oh God, that would be awful. And so, yeah, I think, but for the majority of men, sports is a comfortable space. And honestly, the conversations that we have when we are out running, I don't want to spill on what those confidential conversations are because we're running and chatting, but there are themes amongst them of people's stories about how they've got into running. The people that are joining Well Run Brum are often turning to running as a response to managing their mental well-being in a different way. And I love that expression of mental fitness, particularly because I think it is something that you have to work at on a daily basis. Like, having a positive mental well-being is not something that you can just take for granted. It takes work in the same way that, getting a six-pack takes work. Like, you've got to put in the time. And I think the same with mental fitness. If you want to have a happy, healthy mind, you've got to put in the work. And that is about creating space for open and honest conversation. That is about, for me, sometimes that's about breathing and breath work. And it's about like social accountability as well. That's the other great thing about Well Run Brum is you've got a social accountability. When there are some of our regulars that have not shown up for, a couple of runs, I'm messaging them, and I know there are others in the group that are messaging them as well, being like, hey, I'm checking in, what's going on? Are you just busy, or what's happening right now?
Yeah, that community is really big. I'm really glad that these sort of things are happening. I know that typically it used to be the pub, or it used to be wives, husbands were friends of creating friend groups of men. And that's another big thing is like the lack of friendships within men, and these sort of pockets of things that pop up, it creates those new relationships and these new sort of ideas, and sort of helps men sort of form relationships outside of what they're attached to, whether that's their partner, their job, and that sort of thing. I talk a lot about a group of men that I feel like are really in that core demographic of like 50 to 65, so 1 in 5 not reaching over 65, where they've retired, so they've no longer got a job. They're no longer Keith from work, right? They're just Keith. Their kids have all grown up and left, right? They may have gone through a divorce when they were in their 40s or late 30s, so they're no longer a husband, and they don't have a new partner, and they're at that sort of age where their parents might have passed, so they're no longer a son, and they literally have been stripped of everything just because of the passage of time, and they essentially just become a man again. And I think that's a really hard position to find yourself in, because you've had your whole world shaped around everything that you've done, and then it just disappears and it becomes you're a man again, which I think is really scary. But things like Well Run Brum and other things like that are hopefully creating new relationships for guys, for sure, outside of typical relationships, shall we say.
Definitely. And I think that idea of community is super important. Like, finding that community, like finding your tribe as well, just like that in life is such an important lesson anyway. I think finding those people that are there that like boost you and support you and, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, again, sometimes that takes work though, right? Exactly as you're saying. Sometimes you have to go out and find it, and you've got to build it yourself. You've got to create it yourself, and speak it into existence. But it is out there.
Well, Run Brum started with you going for a run, right? So how did that little conversation in your head go? Like, you sat there, you're not working,
I cannot tell you that first run in March. I'd locked in Dr. Tom Bates, who's a sports psychologist, used to be up at Villa and had gone on to be Adam Peaty's part of his team for the Olympics. An incredible speaker who had agreed to be our first guest speaker. And I'm stood outside the Library of Birmingham, and I'd messaged my brother and been like, please come to this first one, like, just like, please be there. And he was like, yeah, I've got you, I'll be there. And we stood there, and I arrived super early, which is something I'm still not great at. I will always be at Well Run Brum early, and still now, we're over 20 runs in, and I still, in the minutes before the start time, I get this same fear. But on that first day, having not experienced it before, I'm stood with my brother, and he's like, I couldn't do this. And I went, what do you mean? He was like, I couldn't put myself out there like this and just wait for people to show up. It was terrifying. It was horrendous. And yet it would pass. I knew it would pass, because the worst case scenario is me and my brother are going for a run, and we've just got this incredible speaker to come and say a few motivational words to us. That is the worst case scenario. Yeah. Nothing can possibly go wrong except that. And yet, terrified. And what was amazing was, on that first run, I had some friends show up, which was great, obviously. Was so grateful to the friends that showed up. I had my brother show up. But I also had people that I'd never met come along to that first one and have continued to come back. And that blew my mind a little bit, that on that first one, it was about 50-50 mix of people that I knew and people that I didn't know. And that was amazing, genuinely really amazing. So it can be done. You can build that community of people, and amazing friendships are formed out of it. Like, there's a few of us that are signed up for Birmingham Half Marathon next year, for example. I've been over to Telford for a park run, where one of the boys is doing one of his anniversary runs, and I was like, yeah, I'll be there. I've been for a run over in Sutton, did the Movember 10K with another one of our runners. It's incredible friendships, and that I'm reaching out to outside of Well Run Brum to be like, let's go and do this, and also like solidified other friendships as well. Like, one of like the founding runners, for example, my mate Jonathan, has been absolutely incredible in his support and being there and making sure that it is, that he's always championing it. And all of that group, I just think, if you don't have a community of people, go and make one. That ultimately is what Well Run Brum has started out of, is me being like, this is what I need right now in my life. I need a group of men that are comfortable with having a conversation with me around my mental fitness, my mental well-being. And we're really fortunate to be in a position where people like yourself are saying yes to come and talk to us beforehand and say a few words of wisdom to set us off on our way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know whether I'm the best one yet, but thank you. What's next for Well Run Brum?
Well, in March, we'll have been going for a whole year. And there's been lots of different conversations that have been going on about what could happen next. I've had a few approaches from people that are talking about wanting to launch a similar iteration in other places, which I'm totally not opposed to. That would be cool. I've had some conversations about what it means beyond just that fortnightly initiative, like what else could be explored. The speaker network, for example, is incredible in its own right and could warrant its own standalone event for people that are interested in just the conversational side of this. Yeah, I'm definitely ambitious and keen for it to grow and develop. So we'll see what the year brings.
Well, yeah, 1 year's just get to that. That's huge in itself.
Right?
I mean, that's 10 out of 10. Super happy for you. That's amazing. And the fact that people are still coming, it shows it's what people want. And yeah, we can grow it from there in any way, shape, or form. As long as
For
people
sure.
are still turning up, that's all we need. In
Yeah.
regards to the men's space as a whole, what are you seeing that you absolutely love, and what do you want to see more of?
Oh, great. Yeah, I've actually one of the things I've been reading recently is Jordan Stevens. I don't know if you follow his Substack at all. He's just started doing this like advent calendar of musings and writings, and he's been talking a lot about kind of like toxic masculinity and but actually kind of like flipping that and being like wanting to encourage healthier behaviors and like highlighting the positive ones. He was talking the other day uh, about like men calling each other beautiful being a reclamation of authentic masculinity, and I really liked that. And like intimacy being found in male relationships. Intimacy doesn't need to be like a sexual encounter or from your partner, which we've kind of spoken about already, although
Yeah.
probably not framed it around the idea of intimacy, but almost just like rewarding that positive uh, reclamation and that those positive behaviors so that people are empowered and they feel needed and they feel appreciated and yeah, and sometimes beautiful. So I've been really enjoying his words recently. I think that's been super powerful, and just more of that kind of like positive role models talking in a like defining masculinity in that way. I really like that.
Awesome. Yeah, we talked about it in the form of showering after playing sport. That was that was our conversation on that side of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. I'll link it below, and I'll also check it out.
Yeah, do. I'll send you a link to it. Yeah. I mean, some people will know Jordan Stevens from Rizzle Kicks, but
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, definitely check out the Substack. It's cool.
yeah, will do for sure. Richard, if people have loved what they've heard, they want to find out more, they want to reach out to you, or they even want to come to a Well Run Brum, please let them know where to find you, and also I will leave the final thoughts with yourself.
Yeah, amazing. So Well Run Brum you can find on Instagram, search at Well Run Brum. You can find us on Strava as well. And Strava's got the fortnightly events. It tells you who the speaker is each time. So if you're a bit nervous about coming to the first one, it might be that you've got a speaker that particularly attracts you to come along to your first one. So yeah, Strava and Instagram are the best ways to look out for Well Run Brum. And yeah, you'll find me on Instagram as well. I'm tagged in a lot of those posts. But yeah, I think in terms of final thoughts, I think it really is about like, it doesn't have to be Well Run Brum. It can be any running club. And do you know what? In the first instance, it might just be getting out by yourself, doing a Couch to 5K program or whatever it is, but just get up and get out and get moving. Because I think once you're physically moving, things start moving around in your mind as well. And that's where I found the real joy of running and the beauty of being able to better manage my own mental fitness has been in using physical movement to create movement in my mind.